I
for
have,
you, and
I have
it's
a pretty
it's
strong
always very sad.
hypothesis about why that is being done. So I'd like to get your take. Actually, I want to ask you, do you have a hypothesis as to why this is being done? Because you see it in not just gender stuff, but you see it with racial stuff as well. Like you see very weird articles like being on time to work is white supremacy. And like all this for sort of like, it seems completely out of pocket, right? I think I understand it. And I think I understand why and where it's coming from. I just wanted to get your take to see if you sort of understand similarly to me, or if you have a different take on it.
So I mean, it's just money, isn't it? I mean, the short answer is money. That's the the short answer. The long answer is that we are incentivized to find outrageous things to get upset over. I always describe it as like drilling for oil. When we first started drilling for oil, we drilled in the place where oil was readily available and like more or less safe to try and get at. And then we run out of oil, and then we're like, well, we need oil. So then we start drilling in places where it's not quite so safe and a little bit more disruptive. And maybe we shouldn't be doing that at all. And the new currency of our time is social outrage. That's where the money is now. And we've done all the bits where like women are paid the same as men, women have the right to vote, quite rightly. So women have entered the workplace, the big things. And now we're like, well, we need to keep the money flowing in. So let's try to find these other things that are just tearing at the fabric of society, like no longer drilling into the bedrock of the oceans to get oil. We're drilling into the fabric of society, the tectonics of society, and we're causing this massive rift. And we don't need to be like that. We're looking for outrage where there really isn't any, and we're ignoring the places where we should be outraged, such as what you're telling me. And it's difficult to answer that question because I don't know. I don't have that viewpoint. It's a hypothesis completely, but I think it's just about money. Everything seems to be about that.
What? I think you're close. I think it's even more meta than that. I think it's power, right? So this is something that I went down a rabbit hole sort of looking at the university world because in corporate America, we started getting these, like Robin DiAngelo coming, to speak about DEI at our business and, white fragility and like all that. I sort of like started researching some of this stuff, and you trace it back to the postmodernist movement, Foucault, Derrida, and sort of the sort of thought leaders that emerged from that school that are in the universities. And they started the critical theory, right? And then that's where critical race theory comes from. And also queer theory. There's a bunch of these other offshoots, but ultimately it comes down to the constant application of cynical criticism meant to degrade the social fabric. So Western liberal democracy, like that is the enemy, because a lot of these folks are neo-Marxists, and it's like you have to tear down the existing Enlightenment values and the infrastructure and replace that. Has to be burned to the ground, and then you build the Marxist utopia on top of it, right? And so to me, and there's a bunch of folks. Helen Pluckrose is in the UK. She wrote a book with James Lindsay called Cynical Theories. It's an awesome read. Goes into some of the academia behind that, right?
You must have heard about their Grievance Studies affair. That was just one of the most hilarious.
I did.
Heard about, oh my goodness.
I did.
Where they basically
so they very much
articles.
Understand that mindset of academia, because they could publish papers, peer-reviewed papers, and win awards, right? So they've completely cracked the code on sort of some of that stuff.
One of them took Mein Kampf, so Hitler's autobiography, and they rewrote it with feminist jargon to talk about men, and it got published. They were like, "This is brilliant. We love this." Yep. And he was like, "Wow." And like, what else was there? There's one. They wrote one where
there was fat bodybuilding.
Dogs having sex in parks is a sign of rape culture. That got published. That's great academia.
Absolutely.
There's one about men can cure their homophobia by anally penetrating themselves, and that was obviously made up as well. That got published. Like, people will publish any old shit if it's outrageous enough. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for, like, a lot of these journals aren't looking for like rigor. They're looking for outrage. Because it's money.
Well, hold on a second, though, George. Hold on a second. This is really important. And if you listen to, Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, and Helen Pluckrose talk about when they first started, that's not true. It was not just outrageous, because they started with outrageous shit, and they realized that they kept getting rejected by these journals, and they realized that there actually was some internal consistency to these the way these people thought. Like I said, that's where it goes back to the postmodernism, which posits that we can't know anything of objective reality, and everything in society is just just power games between groups of people, right? That's the core tenets of postmodernism. And they thought, okay, I could just deploy some bullshit and it would get passed through. And they found out actually there is internal consistency with those folks in academia. And then they had, like I said, had to sort of deconstruct how they thought about things and learn that, and then they could get that stuff through. So it's not pure bullshit. There's actually some sort of some rigor to some degree, or at least it's like a religion, right? Like there's tenets of the religion, and you have to follow and subscribe to these certain things.
Yeah, it is
so
like a religion.
I think that was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, a religion, I always try and not refer to these subjects as any sort of science, because they're not falsifiable. And if something's not falsifiable, it's better described as an ideology or religion, or maybe even a cult. But certainly not science. Like science is the opposite. In fact, science advances by disproving itself. So science creates a theory, and then the entire world of science tries to disprove that theory. And if they can't, they're like, this will do for now until we find something better. Or it is disproven, in which case it's thrown out straight away. And science advances by falsifying itself. Whereas these movements you talked about, social justice, feminism, critical race theory, they advance by protecting itself from falsification. It changes the theory itself to protect itself from being proven wrong. It doesn't hold itself up to the scientific method, and therefore is not a science. And therefore
intentionally so.
Not interested in. Yeah.
Intentionally so. I'm not sure if you're aware. Have you heard of standpoint epistemology?
No, but I'm looking forward to you telling me about it.
Oh, so standpoint epistemology comes from that critical school of social justice, which says essentially that the thing that you just posited, like, hey, science is the best way for us to know anything about the objective universe. They say, no, there are different ways of knowing. And then objective truth, like I said, doesn't matter, doesn't exist. And a group that, comes to truth by sacrificing a goat on the hood of their car on a Tuesday is equally as valid as somebody in our paradigm, the Western paradigm, who uses empirical reality, objectivity, the predictive power of science, falsifiability, all of those things. And those are actually systems of oppression and white supremacy in that social justice mindset. So that's a very interesting point.
I just don't know. I mean, like, emotions don't really exist in science, and like I said, like science, like scientific theories are easily disprovable if only they could be. Like evolution, I suppose, is one of the most famous theories, and like if they found just one single fossil of a more evolved creature lower down in a sedimentary rock than a less evolved, if that just happened just one single time, the whole theory would be thrown out. But that's never happened, and unless you're testing a theory in that way, it's not something to be respected, at least not from me.